Hi, I'm Pastor Kurt, and this is your 5-minute Bible study. Today, we're going to be looking at 1 Samuel chapter 17, the famous story of David and Goliath. Now, even if people aren't familiar at all with the Bible, chances are pretty good they still know this story. This is one of the biblical stories that has just made its way into our cultural lexicon. When we talk about a David and Goliath situation, we know to cheer for the underdog. And yes, that is sort of what's going on here. But we need to set the scene here. Yes, David's taking on Goliath. But Goliath is part of the Philistines, and the Philistines are attacking the Israelites. Saul is still king at this point. Saul also knows that God has said he's no longer fit to be king, that there will be a new king instead. What Saul doesn't know is that this new king is David. So when David shows up to the battlefield to check on his brothers who are serving with Saul, Saul doesn't know that this little kid is the up-and-coming king. Well, David shows up at the request of his father Jesse to see how things are going in the battle, to see how his brothers are doing. He hears about the Philistines, he hears about Goliath, and he tells Saul, hey, I can take on this giant. Saul, of course, thinks that's ridiculous, right? You're just a boy and he's a giant. He's going to squash you like a bug. David tells Saul that God is going to help him, just like God helped him protect his sheep when animals tried to attack. Saul starts to go along with it and say, okay. But then there's an important moment in this story, one that often gets overlooked. Before David goes out to battle with Goliath with his sling and his bag of stones, Saul tries to put his own armor on David. Now, in one sense, of course, he's looking out for David, right? Because David is so small and Goliath is so big. He thinks David needs some kind of armor to keep him safe. Well, David puts on the armor, but then he says, I can't move. These things are way too heavy for me. It's not my size. This isn't going to work. So he takes off the armor, and he goes out to battle without any armor and carrying just his sling and his stone. Of course, Goliath thinks this is ridiculous too. But the important thing to see in this moment about King Saul's armor is that sometimes when we face a challenge in life, like David facing Goliath, sometimes other people think we need to face that challenge the way they would face that challenge. Saul would face Goliath by putting on all of this armor and trying to protect himself. David faced Goliath not with armor, but with his trust in God. This is what makes the difference here. David, on his own, could not defeat Goliath. Goliath is huge, and David is not. But David went out with a strong trust in God, knowing that God would see him through, just like how God had saw him through when he protected his sheep from all those wild animals. When you are facing some kind of gigantic problem in your life, other people will come and give you advice about how to handle it. And sometimes the advice is good, and sometimes it's not so good. Sometimes what they do might work for you, and sometimes it really won't, like trying to wear Saul's armor. But in the face of that problem, know that God is still with you. God is giving you the strength to overcome that problem. David didn't go out to battle Goliath all by himself. He went out with God. He also didn't go out without any weaponry. He had his sling and his bag of stones. It didn't look like much, but it was enough. God used David and what David had to overcome this problem. So when you are scared, remember David. Yes, this is a famous story. And I think part of the reason this story is so famous is because we like the underdog. We like hearing about how this poor, small little David overcame this giant challenge of Goliath. We see ourselves in David's position. But remember, David did not do this on his own. He did it only because God was with him and God was working through him. There's your 5-minute Bible study for today. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.